Welcome everyone to HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm your host, Kevin McPherson. We are breaking new ground tonight. Actually, I did my first Football Hogs report a week ago. So we did that as a standalone. Tonight, we're splitting it up. 15 minutes devoted to Hoop Hogs. We'll have a little bit of everything in 15 minutes. We'll see if I'm able to do that. And then we'll follow up with another 15 minutes talking Football Hogs and the second scrimmage. Arkansas's had two close scrimmages now. And when you look at the 2 weeks that they've been in for fall camp, let's just call it brutal summer camp. And the football season kickoff, the first game's less than 2 weeks away. So we got basketball to talk about. We got Hogs football. So let's get right into it. Appreciate everyone that's joining me on Sunday night. We're getting this out of the way. Got a lot to do still tonight when we get off here. I got to run out of town, and then we'll see if I'm back on Monday. I may have to wait till Tuesday, but we'll see. But it'll be interesting doing a basketball football. I may do the hybrid like this moving forward. We can call it the Franken Hogs, part basketball, part football. That was corny. Frankenstein made of multiple different parts. I don't know. Doesn't work. Let's jump right into the hoops. Arkansas's team is expected back on campus. School starts tomorrow for everybody, right? Fall semester, first day of classes. The basketball team's been out. The last day they were on the court together and really broke to wrap up limited summer work was on July 16th. So, been a little bit more, just basically a month. And you had some of the players arriving earlier in the week. I think a couple of the first ones to get in were Darius Acuff Jr., the true freshman guard, Isaiah Seeley, true freshman wing. Of course, Seeley's from Springdale. Not a surprise that he'd be in the area. So those guys got in a little earlier in the week, I was told. So some of the others are just arriving. I'm not even sure I'm checking Instagram accounts. Doesn't mean they have to, let me know that they're on campus by going on to Instagram and letting all of us know. But I haven't seen a whole lot of activity on Instagram other than photos and things going on while they were off campus, back home or wherever they were doing camps, other things. I think it's expected, though, that everybody will be back to start limited practices again, which will ramp right back up. And then eventually that flows into the full bore basketball practice, which you get up to 20 hours a week. Limited stuff is 8 hours per week, 4 on the court instruction, 4 strength and conditioning. And so you could see the difference when it ramps up to 20 hours per week. But this is how it always is. And you got to get everybody back on campus and in class. Calipari's been out. He's been out. Good evening, Kevin. Thank you. I'm glad you're doing football too. Well, thank you. We got a great group. Otis Kirk does a great job, one of the best to ever do it with our football coverage. And we got others that are also efforting the football coverage this year and last year. So appreciate the nice comments. But as far as basketball goes, Calipari's been out. Chuck Martin, assistant coach, he's traveled a lot overseas. He was one of the first coaches in the building earlier in the week. So again, they've just kind of been trickling in players and staff. I'm assuming Calipari's back by now. We've got some more updates for you. I guess we'll call it intel if you didn't already know. I'm told Elmir Zovic, and we haven't heard a whole lot about other than his commitment. That was back in June, the 7-footer out of Bosnia. I'm told all his paperwork was taken care of. I've learned this last week. Just haven't had time to talk about it yet. So everything's in order. It's just now a matter of, is he on campus yet? When does he arrive? But all the paperwork stuff, there are no hangups, I'm told. So unless there's something unforeseen and there's a box that wasn't checked or something that pops up later, it sounds like all of that was taken care of based on what I was told. The staff, this is something interesting. I thought that I learned the last few days, just talking about the staff's perspective. Apollo Samito, the other 7'1" center that's coming in for fall semester. Remember, Zovic and Samito did not go through Junior July limited work. When we've been reporting, they're both expected in for the start of fall, the fall semester, and then finally joining the team in limited practices. But I'm told the staff is really high on Samito. Now, we've talked about the fact that, it may be a minute before he plays meaningful minutes. It has a meaningful impact and role. And so who knows how soon that is. Even if it's more developmental this year, when you've got a veteran front line, you're only 3 deep, though, 4 and 5. So we know how injuries plagued Arkansas last year. And I think the fact that the staff is high on this player, and, we'll see, they'll see what they get once he arrives on campus. They start working with him, but they see good things for him. And again, whether that's later rather than sooner, we'll see. But they are pleased with what they've got in Paulo Samito. And that was a late addition, again, 7'1", a 4-5 combo. Many of you probably already seen his highlights. All right, so that's kind of the business as usual. When we talk about the current team and just getting back to school, some little notes there. One other thing I'll throw in there, I was told a little bit more, a little intel nugget. We had talked about how Malik Thomas, once they broke for summer, he was spotted a lot inside the Performance Center before he departed, whenever that was. And, spending a lot of time in there. I'm also told now that for, however many days Billy Richmond's been on campus since they broke and left, and finished up the limited summer work, that he has spent his fair amount of time working on his game and putting in the hours in the Performance Center. So that's just one more name to throw at you after we talked about Malik Thomas in that vein. Now you're hearing more about Billy Richmond III. And remember, BR3 looked really good in the 1 hour window we got to practice back in July. That was July 9th. And then we've been hearing really good things about him throughout June and July. And he ended up being one of the top 5 players on the team. When we looked at what they did in the summer, we ranked him in the top 5. So it's not a surprise that he's putting in the extra work. All right, let's shift gears a little bit. We've been talking about Calipari's discussion on a recent podcast about it takes 2 top 10 players to be a Final Four contender, a national championship contender. And we've kind of taken a look at, we've had some talking points, kind of diving into what that would look like for Arkansas. So we spent time talking Carter Knox last week, or this past week. Then we were on Darius Acuff Jr. So we talked about those two. And I mentioned Trevan Brazil would be next in this series of, well, let's poke around a little bit. Let's kick the can a little bit here and see what we get in terms of how do you feel? Do you think Trevan Brazil has the chops to be like an All-American type guy, or to work himself into lottery talk when you look at the draft and maybe a top 10 player coming out of the college game and you look at NBA draft? I think both things are on the table, as far-fetched as that seems for the NBA part of it. And then statistically, he'll have to really achieve, and this is a 5th-year guy. It's not a 2nd-year player like Knox, not a 1st-year player like Acuff, but we know he's dealt with injuries and inconsistency. He played the best basketball of his career consistently the last 9 or 10 games of the regular season. This past year, when you started having attrition, your leading scorers, he really stepped up and was a driving force for that team that eventually made it to the Sweet 16. Calipari said he was playing as well as any post player in the country. A couple of years ago, Eric Patrick Musselman, his previous coach, after he went down with an knee injury, said we just lost one of the top 5 players in the SEC. Don't forget, when he came back off that injury in that next season, EPM's last at Arkansas, he was a preseason first-team All-SEC pick. So there's, some of the performances he's had, some of the stretches of games he's had, there's a proof of concept that if he can just maintain consistency and do it moving forward and be counted on for it, that, yeah, he's not only an all-league guy, maybe as good as first-team All-SEC. If he's your best player and he's your leader and you have a great season. Remember, when you start talking about individual awards, postseason honors for individuals, a lot of times, unless you're just you're putting up some insane numbers that are off the charts and kind of sets you apart. If not that, it's the best players on the best teams. And he was the best player in the summer. That's how we had him ranked. That's how other observers saw it. The day I was in the gym, he not only looked bigger, stronger, he was locked in, proactive on both ends of the court. And when you see him engaged in that motor churning, the sky's the limit for this guy. And you don't see 5th-year guys, improve their draft stock to a point of not being drafted, which is what his grade was last year, to not only having a draft projection, but potentially first round. And you can't even rule out lottery if he just goes insane and is making a case for himself as the player of the year in college basketball. All that seems like a lot to say for someone that's had 9 really good games, but he's built on that since we've seen him last. His maturity level in interviews, everything about him, it's like he's leveled up, taken a bit more than one level, 2 or 3. And so you just don't know, because these were the things that were on the table for him before we had a history of injuries and inconsistent play and some aloofness, some ball watching, some stuff where you're wondering when is it going to kick in? When does he buy in fully? But Trevan Brazil, man, there's a case that I don't think we're not predicting anything here. We're talking about if you need 2 guys that are top 10, whether that's some combination of an All-American, first, second, or third team, that's top 15 players in the country in theory. The draft is a different animal often, where you're basing it on potential, and they're true freshmen usually, and they're one and dones, and they weren't necessarily all Americans. That happens a lot, but maybe some combination of that, would help Arkansas be what Calipari says he needs or thinks it takes to be the kind of team, again, Final Four talk, national championship talk. I think on paper as a team, there's potential for that. There's talent, there's size, there's athleticism, there's retention, so experience. A lot of returning production in minutes that puts Arkansas on a shelf higher than most Division I programs, high major programs. And you're coming off a Sweet 16 where you're a whisker away from an Elite Eight. And Calipari says he thought they were Final Four good. Well, Florida was the next team on your, in the bracket in your regional finals, which would have been the Elite Eight game, the regional finals. You had to beat Florida then to get to the Final Four. We know Florida was the eventual national champion. So, and we know Calipari's talking about he's scheduled as though he believes in this team. So he believes, when you look at the non-conference in terms of they're going to be prepared for this, they're built for it, they're ready for it. Now we'll see what's real. Shooting's a question mark, depth, all the stuff we talk about, but all the positives I said lead you to believe on paper they maybe have the chops to be a final weekend team. Then you're talking about, do you have 2 top 10 players? Does it have to be exactly that, the way Calipari prescribed it? Maybe not, but going along with what he said, he's the head hog. He's been doing it for decades and a Hall of Fame coach by more than a decade. So let's listen a little bit and let's figure out who might fit the bill. Chemistry, guys getting along, players liking each other, all that stuff matters too. It's not just about what they can do individually. How do they come together? How do they play together? It's not going to be just about having two top 10 guys. Other players have to step up. They have to mesh, and it has to work, right? It has to work. And we've seen talented teams fail or not be as good as you thought they'd be. And then we've seen teams at Arkansas that surprise. This one, the way that we've talked about it, the way that he's scheduled, and the spotlight that this team's going to be on all these big national stage games, when you combine non-conference and SEC, that's going to be a big deal. All right, we're 12 and a half minutes in. I've made my case. Trevan Brazil, All-American, averaged over 11 points and over 9 rebounds per game in that final stretch. Shot, around 39% on three, and his three-point shooting volume went up. How aggressive and effective can he be? How efficient can he be? Can he be someone that averages 15 to 16 points and is grabbing between 8.5 and 10 rebounds per game and blocking shots? And then it won't just be about the stats. It'll be about, you look on the court and he's the guy that everybody else is falling behind. He's the leader. He's the catalyst. He's the centerpiece. When you go into games, the other team, the number one guy on their scouting report is Trevan Brazil. How do we deal with him? And then we got to worry about these other guys too. But how do we? So those are the kind of things that could put him. But he's got to do it. He's got to earn. He's got to put himself there. All right, little over 13 minutes in. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. We're about to jump over and talk football hogs in a minute. I just want to throw in one more thing. Spent all day Saturday at the Isaiah Joe Daryl Macon joint camp here in Little Rock in the 501. We know Daryl Macon's a Little Rock, was a star at Little Rock Parkview, was a star at Arkansas, first team All SEC performer at guard, and helped Arkansas get to back-to-back NCAA tournaments in his time as a Razorback. Played a little bit in the NBA. He's played a lot overseas. He told me he's going to be playing next in Greece. And then Isaiah Joe, we know, helped Oklahoma City his best season as a pro. Averaged double-figure scoring in the regular season in what was one of the unprecedented. There were some unprecedented things that Oklahoma City Thunder team did. One of only 7 teams to win 68 games or more in a regular season, but a lot of stuff they did along the way, no other NBA team had done, including regular season and playoffs. And he helped that team to an NBA Finals championship. But Isaiah Joe giving back with his camps. These are really good camps. They're bringing a lot of trainers, professional level guys. And they spend a lot of time. There was a youth camp that went in the morning, an elite camp, the best players in the state of Arkansas, including 2028 Anthony Spratt Jr., who I interviewed. You can watch the video of that on my Twitter page at AR Hoopscoop, Twitter X, Anthony Spratt Jr. We know Cal, that's the youngest player that Cal thinks he's ever offered. That offer came out early in the week last week. I reported that first, got that out there, and we've talked a lot about it. I've already talked about some things he told me on here, but then I've got a video interview with him from Isaiah Joe camp. I also have interviews with Isaiah Joe and Daryl Macon. It was a treat to be around those guys. But some of the top players in the state were out there as well. I mentioned that. Youth camp in the morning, afternoon, and evening was the elite camp. And it was a good time was had by all, but it was an outstanding camp. It's not just about showing up for a T-shirt and a box lunch. Again, he brought in some of the top trainers out there, and they had station work, and they did a really good job of walking through, instructing, demonstrating, and then repetition with each player, going through what's expected and then correcting things as they went. So there's a lot that these young players can take away from that and take it and carry on in their journey as basketball players. Again, it wasn't just showing up to play 5-on-5 pickup. They really drilled down on instruction. So kudos to Isaiah Joe and Daryl Macon for that. All right, nearly 16 minutes in. I knew I'd go over. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. Once again, please, if you haven't done it already, please hit subscribe, like, and share. That helps us out. Appreciate you guys joining me on a Sunday evening. Man, it was round 2 for the close scrimmages for the football Hogs. They had one a week ago, Saturday. Another one yesterday. They ran fewer plays yesterday, about 25 fewer plays. But there were some things that stood out to me that Sam Pittman talked about in the post-scrimmage presser. Now, it was a close scrimmage, so media was not available, not able to watch that. A week ago, some stats were provided, not a lot, but some. Didn't get any stats from this Saturday. So there's not a whole lot in terms of breaking it down, like a ton of who did what, but a couple of stats that jumped out at me. I mean, just jumped out at me is Mike Washington, the transfer from New Mexico State, who had a really nice showing apparently in the first scrimmage, and just showed it again yesterday. A 91-yard run. Pittman talked about that. I mean, that's insane. The guy's got speed. He's got good size. Bobby Petrino, who loves this offense, by the way, we're going to talk a little bit about that, has raved about him. He really likes him. But this is a guy, he compares him to Nile Davis. Well, we know what damage Nile Davis did in that backfield. And Petrino's offense back in the BCS Bowl era, when Arkansas arguably had its best two back-to-back seasons since joining the SEC. I don't think there's much of an argument for another couple of seasons, but Nile Davis was the lead at the running back spot, outstanding player. And we think about Mallet and the passing game, and some of the other quarterbacks that came through there, Wilson, the Allen brothers, but it started under Petrino, but you had Nile Davis. And so if you're hearing Petrino talk about a player like that and make that comparison, he just doesn't typically do that. So Mike Washington Jr. has been a standout on offense. He had the 91-yarder and a 32-yarder, according to Pittman, who described that action. He also mentioned the play on offense, obviously back-to-back weekends now, Taylon Green at quarterback. And we'll talk turnovers here in a minute, which helps to explain the story better with him, because that's always going to matter with him. But, he had 5 or 6 touchdowns, according to Pittman, in the first scrimmage. Said he had another good performance on Saturday. They're pleased with the backup, KJ Jackson, of course. He's earned some praise as well. But when you look on offense, the old man, Monty Harrison, about to turn 30, right? Had the baseball career. He's made big plays in both scrimmages. So is this a guy, he was on the roster last year, is this a guy that's really going to kind of nudge his way into a prime role? Because we know the depth chart, there's some other names on there at the top. And so here's a guy that continues to, show that he belongs on the field. So he was, it was one of the players that Pittman talked about and was asked a lot about, because he continues to perform. But Pittman's been pleased with the offense. The offense obviously had the advantage in the first scrimmage. Pittman said that the defense was better on Saturday, but it sounds like the offense, now you're going 1s versus 2s and 2s versus 1s, the 3s v 3s. So sometimes you have to be leery about numbers and things you're hearing and positives, because you're not sure exactly how it's going to look when you're going up against the best and live bullets against competition that you don't see every day. It sounds positive. Petrino, I have a source that's told me that in the off season, after they were done with the spring, before they came to fall camp, just telling everybody, and that we not just passersby, but football people connected to it, people that would know better, if he's shining them. And he's not that kind of guy anyway. But he's really happy with the offense. Now, he talked earlier in the week when it was his turn to do a press conference, and it was mostly glowing, but it's stuff he's been saying for a while. He likes the personnel better at just about every position group that needed restocking, parts of the offensive line. the totality of the receivers. Now, you lost reliable guys like, and a playmaker, but people don't talk about him enough as a playmaker. Andrew Armstrong, Tesla. I mean, you've lost a lot there. Your leading rusher and touchdown producer on the ground last year is gone. And so you got a lot of positive. We just talked about Mike Washington Jr., Braylon Russell, the sophomore running back out of Benton, the Benton Bulldozer. Pittman commented that he had a good practice. It sounds like Mike Washington's the name to keep an eye on. But Petrino's telling folks in the offseason that people are going to notice the improvement on this team. Now, he's talking about an offense last year that finished top 10 in college football in yards per game. Now, it had its problems, obviously, scoring the ball, and a lot of that you can lay at the feet of the turnover problems and then the penalties also. So the scoring, wasn't quite up to snuff. I think Arkansas was top 50 in scoring, somewhere at 44th, something like that. But they were 10th in college football in total offense when you look at the yards, total footage. So if he's happier with this offense, it means several things. The personnel, specifically, when he's not only talking about Mike Washington, but when he's talking about Corey Robinson at that left tackle spot and how athletic he is, how pleased he is with him. We know Carmona on that left side as well at guard. More questions on the right side. But they're pleased with some of the work they're seeing on that offensive line. But I think maybe the speed overall at wide receiver is an improvement over last year. That's what we're hearing. And then again, you want guys like Braylon Russell to take a step or two this upcoming season. He may not be as far along as they'd like, but I think he's coming on. And then we'll see what you really have in Washington. But it sounds like he's explosive and a big-time playmaker. If you remember last year, Jaquinion Jackson, as productive as he was when he could stay on the field and he found the end zone a lot, he wasn't an explosive kind of guy. He was just a smart runner. But these home run hitters, man, and they say this guy's tough, physical, beyond just if he's got to be in the open field and make you miss. You think Bobby Petrino offense, those wheel routes he likes, guys that he can get in space and have that kind of speed, they can take it to the house. And, so Petrino's going to find a way to work these toys in that he's talking so favorably about, talking well about it this week. And again, in the offseason, I'm told he's just been raving about it to whoever will listen. So at least on that side of the ball, if he's confident, maybe there's a level of confidence you can take into the season. But they ran 115 plays yesterday between the 1s v2s, 2s v1s, and 3s v3s. A week ago, I think it was 140, so 25 fewer plays yesterday. One of the biggest things that Pittman talked about coming out of it was that they were very, very healthy on the other side of this scrimmage. Okay, so there's always some exceptions to very, very healthy. We were talking running backs. Rodney Hill, I guess it's precautionary. They kept him out. He's a veteran. He had a big bowl game for Arkansas. I remember that last year with Jack Jackson gone. He had an 81-yard game against Texas Tech in the Liberty Bowl. Had probably his best game of the season. He did not scrimmage. They held him out. And we're going to talk defense later on the next show. But a couple of things that Pittman said, that he was really pleased with Phillip Lee. Now, he's a redshirt senior out of Jacksonville. His pass rushing is what caught Pittman's eye. He talked about that. And we know with Cam Ball, we know there's some certain Cam Ball did not scrimmage a week ago. He did scrimmage Saturday, and Pittman said he played well. But we know on that line, outside of Ball and Rhodes, there's a lot of question marks. You got David Oki, who's dealing with a hamstring issue. Pittman spoke on that. So obviously he didn't play, but he talked about that and said that he's on, I think he referenced medicine or medication. It takes a few days for that to take effect or whatever. So hamstring there. We'll see if that ends up being one of those things that turns in day to day, or if we get a different timetable on his return. When you look at Xavier Sorey with his Oki, his is a knee issue. I'm sorry, I misspoke there. Do I have that right? I think his is the knee issue. Sorey is the hamstring, and so Sorey's still out. And so we'll see about those two as we move forward. And we're going to talk next time we come on. We're going to talk more defense and get into that, because today we're focusing a little bit more on offense as we go through it. The other thing that Pittman said is next week, Arkansas will go through another scrimmage on Saturday, and that'll be a week prior to the season opener against Alabama A&M at Reynolds Razorback Stadium. That's scheduled for a 3:15 p.m. Central Time kickoff. But you're going to have a scrimmage next week, and there will be no tackling to the ground. So I guess they're ramping things down a little bit, which makes sense. But he did reference that. So they will do another run through, I guess we'll call it, no tackling to the ground next Saturday. We mentioned Ball back in practice. Rodney Hill held out. No tackling to the ground next weekend. I'm just making sure I've covered everything here that I wanted to get through. But Philip Lee, just jumping back defensively for a minute, because Pittman said the defense was better this time, and he singled out Philip Lee. So that's promising, because I think there are question marks, especially with Oki and whatever his timeline is. When you look at that line and that front four, to hear that Philip Lee, and it's a veteran guy, to hear that he will, Taylor Kenny, we're talking basketball here in some of the comments still. You want to see him be consistent and continue to do that. And you like to see pass rush. One of the things when Pittman was looking back on the scrimmage, he was asked about turnovers, and that's what we're going to kind of wrap with here. He said there was only one turnover. It was a deflection and an INT in the 3s versus 3s. So that's good. And we go back to Taylor Kenny, 5 or 6 touchdowns a week ago. We didn't get a lot of specifics there, but if he's, you don't have any INTs, you don't, and that was a big problem last year. I think it's part of a player's DNA until you prove it's not. It wasn't just an outlier of a season last year. It's a DNA he brought with him. And now Petrino's got a second year with him. And Petrino, we know, is very good at getting quarterbacks to be what he needs them to be. They won't get him to be perfect, but he gets them at a high level. I think his talent makes him an all-league potential, but that's just part of it. I mean, he's got to clean up and, minimize the INTs. I think he's got to do a better job of seeing receivers that are open. He holds the ball too long sometimes when there's a play to be made, and he eats a sack, or it's an incomplete pass. But he can break big plays with his legs. When he scrambles and gets out of the pocket, he can throw the ball downfield. Some of his better plays when he was on the move. So he needs to get more comfortable in the pocket. I guarantee you Petrino wants to see that as well. And so we'll see, when we're really able to put eyes on this, what progress has he really made? Don't forget, he had 9 INTs last year, 15 touchdowns, 9 INTs, 3,150 yards passing. He also put the ball on the floor and lost fumbles 4 times. And a lot of those turnovers, no turnover is good, but it seemed like they were complete momentum killers because so many of them were on the wrong side of the field and led to easy scores, either direct touchdowns off the play, pick six, whatever, what have you, short fields. And then you combine that with Arkansas's propensity. We talked the last time I was on about Arkansas and how poor of a team it is relative to the field, relative to college football, the championship bowl division or whatever it is, whatever they call it. And 134 teams, Arkansas ranked 114th last year in penalties. And then the last 3 games of the year, when you're hoping they're getting better in that department, they were much worse. They were 3rd. And so they're not good enough on either side of the ball. They don't have enough talent. They don't have what it takes to shoot themselves in the foot consistently against teams that are going to take advantage and rough them up. So you go from the turnover issue. It sounds like so far so good. And Petrino loves the offense, but the other part are penalties, and that's both sides of the ball. Dead ball penalties, jumping in the neutral zone on defense, false starts on offense, calling a timeout so that you don't have a penalty and you get the right personnel out there. And you get the right play off, and then you come out of the timeout and you get a penalty. It's stuff like that. And again, you're playing behind the chains now. So even when you were moving the ball at top 10 offense, you understand why a combination of those penalties and turnovers, why you're 44th in scoring. And that's at the end of the day, you got to score points. You could be ranked at the bottom of football and offense, but if you can find ways to score and outscore the other guy, that would matter more. So you want to see Petrino's offense, what it always does, move the ball, put itself in great positions. Now they've got to capitalize. Now you've got to have guys like your point guard, your quarterback. Taylor Green's got to be the leader there. I think by example, if he cuts down on his mistakes, I think others will fall into line. But I think also, again, you got to look at the top. It always goes back to coaching when it's consistently year after year, you look at the penalties. That starts at the top, in my opinion. So they got to figure that out. And I think one of the things Pittman says, in his quotes, I think he talked about the fact that they didn't get penalties in these two scrimmages. So, if they're limiting turnovers and they didn't have penalties in two scrimmages, then that sounds like maybe they're turning a page. But I got to go prove it when the games matter and the lights are on. All right, 30 minutes, 45 seconds. I knew I'd go over 30 minutes. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm sure I left out some basketball stuff we need to talk about, but we'll get to it next time. I'm sure I know I left a lot just getting started with football, and I'm a little rough-edged with that right now. I'm going to do a little bit better job of that and map out some stuff a little bit differently as we move forward. I didn't have time to go back and rework some stuff today, but I am thinking about that, so we'll be all over that. But I want to thank everybody one more time. We appreciate it. Sunday night, you got other things you can be doing, and you're tuning in to HogvilleNET YouTube Live. It means a lot to me. Again, we're going to sign off wishing everyone well. Hope you have a great week this week. Again, less than 2 weeks away from the start of the football season. Basketball team ramping things back up in practice. So we're going to have plenty to talk about as we move forward. But until next time, take care of yourselves. Thanks for being here. Be good in all your endeavors. See you soon.